This is the Music Therapy Chronicles podcast interview with the team from the Creative Dementia Collective.
I think that, one of the main reasons why we are so terrified of dementia and why we don't talk about it and why it's, like Erin started out with, right, how stigmatized all this language is and talking about it is because at the end of the day, right, it's about disconnection. And that's what scares humans most, is feeling disconnected. And we imagine that if we had dementia and we were in a different version of reality or our version of reality, that we would be disconnected from everything that we care about and love. And so that is why, kind of on an existential level, reality orientation is like not the way to go, because it's creating disconnection for nothing, right? We are being antagonistic and we're arguing with someone's experience just because we think our reality is right and their reality is wrong, right?
You're listening to the Music Therapy Chronicles, a podcast about music therapy from a variety of perspectives. Our ambition is to inspire and connect listeners through meaningful conversations, just like a music therapy conference you can listen to anywhere. My name is Trisha Kayati, and I am a board-certified music therapist from the New England region. If you like what you hear, join our group on Facebook and share your own insights and thoughts about the episodes. You can also connect with us on social media and online at Music Therapy Chronicles. Welcome back to the Music Therapy Chronicles. I hope you're having an amazing day. Today is part one of a 3-part series with the amazing women from the Creative Dementia Collective. This was such an awesome conversation. We literally talked for hours, and I loved getting to know these ladies, hear their stories, their insights, and their passions for dementia care. So this is, like I said, a 3-part series. There was so much content. I had to break it up into 3 episodes. Today, we're going to be talking about some language, some definitions, some ways that we talk about and work with people with dementia, and some considerations we should all have, as well as some of the personal experiences of Kaylee, JL, and Erin, who are the 3 ladies on today's podcast. So I hope you're looking forward to this. Thank you so much for clicking on today's episode. If you are loving the show, please let me know by leaving a review. Those really help the show be more visible, and subscribe so you never miss an episode and so you don't miss parts 2 and 3 with these amazing women. You can follow along with Music Therapy Chronicles throughout the week on our social media platforms. We are at Music Therapy Chronicles. We have a group on Facebook where you can start or join a conversation about any of the episode content. And might I say that some parts of this conversation may stir up some discussion. And also join our newsletter, jump on the newsletter so that you get some behind the scene content, downloads, all that good stuff. I like to share on the newsletter what's on my heart and mind. So please check that out as well. And if you want to earn CMTEs for listening to the show, check out our pod courses, which are housed over at mtpodcastcollective.com. All right, let's get into part 1 with Kaylee, JL, and Erin. All right, everybody. Welcome to the Music Therapy Chronicles.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for coming on the show. For the listeners, we have a large crew here. We have 3 guests on today. So to start us off, will you please introduce yourselves with your name so the listeners can put your voice to your name, and take it away for what you're going to share with us today.
Hi, I'm Kaylee Allen. I'm a board-certified music therapist and 1/3 of the Creative Dementia Collective, and this is the sound of my voice.
I love that. I'm JL Weinberg. I'm an art therapist and a mental health counselor, and this is the sound of my voice.
Oh, well, y'all have teed me up so nicely. I'm the third and final member of the Creative Dementia Collective. My name is Erin Statiker. I am a certified independent trainer with Positive Approach to Care. And we're just super happy to be here this morning. This is the sound of my voice.
Now you all need to harmonize or something.
Yeah, we practice that, right? Yeah, we're ready. Well, Trisha, if we may, I'd love to dive in and create a little context for the conversation today. We were talking, and we always think it's important to start off with some stigma smashing and creating some really positive, dementia friendly language for the conversation we're going to have. And you might hear us use some terms that are like, oh, that's a little unusual, but it sounds like they're saying that really intentionally. And we are. So I think we'll kind of set the tone there, if I may.
Yeah, please.
All right, perfect. So a little bit about us. We're three millennial women. We've all been working in the field of elder and dementia care for, oh gosh, collectively 20 something years. And I don't know, for the last decade. And so we've gotten to work with a lot of folks who are living with dementia, and that is now our passion and purpose here. So you heard me say one already. You said folk or person living with dementia. That's an important one. You'll often hear out in the world people saying a demented person. That's out, y'all. We don't say that anymore. A demented person or an Alzheimer's patient. The most important thing about being a dementia advocate or a care partner is the relationship that you have with that person, right? It's all about the relationship, keeping it positive, keeping it supportive, especially if you're a family member or a loved one. And relationships start with language and in the way that we refer to people. So, calling someone a demented person or an Alzheimer's patient, unless they're being treated in a medical facility, even then they're a person first and a patient second. So we really want to honor the human side of that person, and that they are not their disease, and that they are a person with a disease. Let's see, another one. Someone suffering from dementia or a dementia sufferer. You hear that a lot. My mother suffered from dementia. That may be so. She may have had moments where she suffered from dementia, but when actually asking the community of people who still have the skill to be able to say so, they really did prefer to be referred to as a person living with dementia, or somebody who is doing the very best they can while living with dementia. It's not our job or our role to label that person as suffering and assign them that suffering. They may have times of experiencing really, really challenging, frustrations emotionally, physically, cognitively, but ultimately it's up to them to say if they are suffering. Or if they are finding a way to actually really thrive and find moments of joy living with their dementia. So I invite people to try that one on. It might feel a little bit awkward since we're all so used to saying these kind of terms. But and I think one other really important one that you'll hear us say a lot today is care partner. The alternatives being caregiver or caretaker. And the reason we use the language care partner is because we're here to support and help that person, not to give them something that they may not want or they may not need. Our job is really to partner with them and to empower them to use the skills they have left. And when we work in partnership instead of doing something to them, that's when there's that mutual benefit, right? That relationship thrives. So everything that we do with a person living with dementia should always include permission. You'll become skillful in being able to ask for permission, whether it's verbally or otherwise, as skills decline over time. But even though somebody's living with dementia doesn't mean they surrender their right to permission or consent. The tasks that we're doing with somebody to care for them are shared. We're there to provide that support and to partner with them and to express appreciation for their help. So I hope that kind of distinguishes giving care versus partnering with somebody to provide their own care, and giving them the autonomy of knowing that they can still provide for themselves as well. So, and that relationship's going to change over time as the dementia changes over time. So, but that's always a good context to keep in mind. So, anything else you all would add? I could go on, but
I love it. I thought you did a great job. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. If anything else pops up, if we say something that comes out, we'll just go, ooh, wait, let's pause and distinguish what that one is. So cool.
Love that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for setting the tone. I also love that you mentioned that a lot of these designations have been kind of chosen by the group of people we're working alongside. And because especially the person first language, I feel like depending on which group of people has given their preference, it can go either way. Some people really like the person first language, and some people, say things like disability is not a dirty word. And it's okay. So I love that you distinguish that, and then with the caveat that this is what people with dementia have chosen. This is what they have told us is their preference.
At an international level, in fact.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm glad you said that piece about the dirty word, right? Yeah. Some people, you ever notice how when you talk to some people and they say dementia, and then it just becomes, they whisper it. We're like, let's say it loud, everybody.
Yeah.
Dementia. So we'll say it a lot. Yeah. I think that's a big piece, just giving it, giving it air.
Giving it air.
So.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to let you guys kind of take this where you want to, wherever you want to start today, because I can tell that you all have a lot of passion and you've taken the time to pre-prepare, and I appreciate that. Not necessary, but it's awesome. So you take me on the journey.
Sure. So I'll jump in. One of the topics that we wanted to discuss today are tough transitions. Transitions can be a challenge for a lot of different populations, and people living with dementia is certainly in that category. Anytime you're stopping something and changing gears and going to something else, that takes a lot of effort, a lot of energy, a lot of executive function. So it's demanding. And we thought of a couple of micro examples and then a macro example. And the micro examples that we thought of are kind of at beginning and end of day, right? Bookending the day. If you're starting your day, there's a ton of stuff to do. Tasks like dressing, eating, personal hygiene. And I'm just listing those off. Let's start with dressing. If you are caring for somebody and set out their clothes and say, okay, get dressed, they might be able to do so successfully, but they might also have a hard time sequencing the order of events. So you might have heard of people dressing themselves and wearing their bra or underwear on the outside. They did all the steps, but they didn't sequence them in the right order. So that's a time of the day where a lot of hand holding can go a long way. And we found, particularly in my area of music therapy, adding music to the routine can be super duper helpful. The musical cues, the lyrics in the music, the tempo, the non-verbal communication that happens in music can all help to prompt a routine, especially if you're using it in that way as a routine of, okay, this is how we start the day. We turn on oh, what a beautiful morning. Open the curtains and pull off the covers. And or maybe you have a loved one who doesn't feel like it's oh, what a beautiful morning, and you sing, oh, how I hate to get up in the morning. That's fine too. Meet them exactly where they're at.
Yes.
And those musical cues, especially if you're using them over and over time, will make that mental connection for them. The music itself becomes associated with the task that you're doing every time you're hearing that song or singing that song together. So if you're picking those songs for those tasks, and again, those can be different songs depending on the person. You want to use that client preferred music, right? That music that really gets them moving, that gets them excited. And that can help to make your morning routine a lot smoother. And then on the other side of the day, you might hear a lot about sundowning. For folks who might be unfamiliar with dementia, sundowning describes basically at the end of the day, some folks experience increased agitation, confusion, and anxiety. And what you hear a lot is, oh, gee, this is a really nice place, but I ought to be going home. My mother's going to be expecting me. I'll get in trouble if I'm not home. And so redirecting that anxious energy is really, really key that time of day, particularly kind of getting ahead of it. If you can start to anticipate the small, subtle warning signs of somebody's anxiety is starting to rise, it's really helpful to use music in that time, because music is this whole brain activity. Music is an activity where it's really hard to focus on something else if you're really attending to the music that you're making. So I use the ISO principle, and we'll start with like really high energy to match that anxious energy, to match kind of the energetic feel, and then taper it down real slowly to kind of more mellow. So you're taking their mind off of whatever worries, you're redirecting them toward a really involved activity, allowing them to have an outlet for that energy. So it's not just being held in their bodies. It's got to come out somehow, whether dancing or singing or pounding on a drum. And then you just kind of taper it down slowly until you're at a more mellow place. And it's one of those things that I heard about in one of my music therapy classes and just did not really get it until I saw it work. And was like, oh my gosh, it's like magic. And of course it's not. It's science.
It's magic.
It looks like magic.
It's
right?
magic. It's magic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Science can look a whole lot like magic.
It can.
It's pretty magical. Kaylee, actually, we all come from a background working in long-term care, right? So we that's actually how the three of us met each other. We were all working for an assisted living and memory care company, and working in a memory care setting, very hands-on, worked with hundreds and hundreds of people and their family members and, fellow staff and people living with dementia. So that's how we came together, the Reader's Digest version. But Kaylee at one point trained me in using the ISO principle, and I'm not a music therapist. And she made it accessible to me, to a non-musical person. And I kid you not, y'all, it is so magical. I have success stories coming out of my pores with using that, especially in the evening. And, and it's one of those things that, it's kind of hard to explain to people. I'd be like, just watch, just watch. And they'd be like, half an hour later, they'd be staring at me like, she didn't punch you. She didn't yell. She didn't run away. She didn't need to, She didn't ruin everyone else's evening who's in it was beautiful. So, hats off to that small practice. She's like taking a bow right now, as you should.
I think we can all, connect to the ISO principle in one way or another, like that feeling of when you're really sad and then you put on the saddest music you have just because you need to feel your feelings harder. And then you slowly kind of work your way through the playlist.
Yes. Yes.
Up into something more kind of uplifting. Or if you're really, really angry, right? And you put on some Simple Plan and you just have to dance around your house screaming and, like really feeling the feels. That's how it feels, right? When you're a person living with dementia and someone, imagine if you were really, really angry and really, really frustrated and someone came at you with some like, spa music and they're like, just relax. Fine. You're like,
I will cut you. I will cut you. And I no longer have the executive brain function to tell me not to. So I will actually probably try to hurt you. And that's your fault because you're an asshole who put on spa music when I'm really pissed off. So you had that coming.
Yeah. It's true validation, like, hey, I see you. I see how you're feeling. I see what your nervous system is doing, and I'm going to meet you there.
Yes. You took my thought. I want to pull out a phrase that you said, Kaylee. You said redirect the anxious energy. And I think when we're in a care setting with people with dementia, we can hear that thing. I need to go home. My mom's going to be mad, that kind of a thing. And, of course, we're like, this is an irrational thought. And so we're like, no, you're fine. Let's go to dinner. And just like what you said, JL, like they need a place to put this. And, again, ISO principle needs to match them. They need a place to put it. Maybe we'll take a whole half hour, Erin, to take it down. And, that's exactly it. Redirecting that anxious energy, not just redirecting the person. But taking that energy and letting them have a place to put it and to use it. Yeah.
Right. Because even if they forget why they were anxious and you successfully redirect them to another activity, if you didn't give them an outlet for that energy, they're going to have it in them. They're going to be holding it and not sure where it comes from. I get this. A great example is I'll play a song and then a couple songs later, I'll have a resident ask for the same song because the song is now stuck in their head and they don't know that they just sang it and that's why it's stuck in their head. They just know, that song's playing in my head. I want to hear it, right? So the same thing with our mood and our energy. Even if you turn them to a new mood and you're successful or you get them distracted in a new activity, if you don't give them a place to put the energy that comes with that mood, be it frustration or anxiety or what have you, they're still going to be holding that energy later. And if it's not given an outlet, they're just like, why do I feel, what is this? And they can't verbalize it, of course, or often can't verbalize it. So then they're just stuck with this energy. It's very key. You're not just distracting them. It's an outlet and it's intentional.
Well said.
I think this is one of those opportunities that has come up. I'm like, ooh, there's an opportunity to define something here. So we're using the term dementia broadly, right? And it's really a really broad term. And I think we'd be remiss if we didn't acknowledge that, right? And not every person who is living with dementia has the same type, has the same symptoms, does it show up the same way? So, for listeners, I'm sure you may or may not know, but dementia itself is not actually a diagnosis. It's an umbrella term for a syndrome or a set of symptoms. And there's lots of different types, forms of dementia. There's like 85 to 90, actually. Probably the most popular one and the one that everyone always jumps to, obviously, is like Alzheimer's, right? But there's Lewy body dementia, there's vascular dementia, there's frontotemporal dementia, and they all affect people and the brain differently, and they all are expressed differently. And it's super, super important for us as care partners to actually know what type of dementia this person has so that we can understand how it's affecting them. There's 4 things that are true about all dementias. Number 1, at least 2 parts of your brain are dying. Number 2, it's going to keep changing. It's progressive, right? And it's going to get worse. That's a truth. It's not curable. It's not fixable. There are other things that mimic dementia that certainly are curable and fixable. And it's terminal. So, as a care partner, it is really important to have some, to understand what type of dementia, or kind of mixed picture, multiple types of dementia are at play, so that you can understand what's going on with that person. Why is that behavior showing up the way it is? When we understand, what brain change is happening, we can have compassion for it. And then we can change one of the things that we do actually have control over, right? Which is our approach to them. We were using the sundowning example. There's people who, it's like, this woman's 95 years old and she's like, my mother's expecting me home. And you're like, are you freaking kidding? Like, no, obviously no. But it's our job to understand that for her and her reality and her, time and space orientation, like that is very real for her. And the practice of, quote unquote, reality orientation, like totally out. We don't do that anymore, folks. That is super old school. Being like, well, Marjorie, your mother's actually been dead for 60 years. Like, no, we don't do that.
Way to redirect anxious energy to more anxious energy.
Exactly. And again, another way to really get yourself in a sticky situation and, compromise the relationship, between you and that person. It's going to make any other thing that you really do need to accomplish for the rest of the day, and the feeling that you have between you a lot harder. Because you're going to be that, that lying jerk who comes in and, tells me that I'm delusional and crazy, and you make me feel stupid and I hate you and I'm going to hit you. And then you totally had that coming. So
I would love to piggyback on that, because my husband and I are becoming guardians for my dad, who has dementia, later this summer. And so we've been having a lot of conversations about do's and don'ts of being a care partner. And one of the conversations was about this reality orientation business, right? Like, don't disagree with their version of reality. And I explained it to my husband one day, probably in a hurry and probably not very eloquently. And he came back to the conversation and he's like, so I know you're not supposed to say no to a person with dementia, but what if blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh no, that's not it actually. And then I had to really parse out the specifics of that conversation and say, we don't disagree with their reality. We don't tell them they're wrong about their reality. If they say that they're 30 and they have babies at home, you don't say, no, you're 70 and by the way, I'm your baby.
Yeah.
It's not disagreeing with that. And then we talked about why. And I think that was really key for him. And he'll describe himself this way, so I don't think he'll be mad at me for saying this on the podcast, but he'll describe himself as a layman, as like clueless when it comes to dementia. And I think for him, understanding the why of that was really important. So pretty much the why of that is what Erin just alluded to. If I am absolutely sure in my reality that I'm in a certain time or place, and in actual reality, it's not that time or place, but you as my care partner tell me I'm wrong, I'm not going to just suddenly orient to the reality and be like, oh, thank you so much for telling me. Now I'm paranoid and you're a liar and I don't trust you. Why are you lying to me? What do you want from me? And now, like, we've broken a part of trust in that relationship.
Yeah.
So that was really key. And there's certain things that you really need to make sure that that you are getting them to cooperate with, like basic care, hygiene, medications. But if they want to believe it's 1950, cool. Like, what song is your favorite song playing on the radio? Who are the friends you're hanging out with? Like, take me there. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think, this is JL. I think that, to explain to people kind of from an existential perspective why this is such an important part of dementia care. Because, when I would give lectures about, explaining dementia to people who had loved ones who were living with dementia or newly diagnosed, and I would explain, imagine right now, we'd be sitting in some conference room. Like, imagine right now if I said, we are on a beach in Hawaii, and you would be like, no, we're not. We're in a beige conference room somewhere. And I said, no, we're in Hawaii. Can't you see the waves in front of you? Can't you feel the sun on you? Can't you feel the sand under your feet? And you're like, no, no, no. And then I get more forceful about, we are in Hawaii. And you're like, we're not, though. We're in a conference room. Why are you lying? Right. And then imagine that shift happens where you can start to feel sand beneath your feet, right? Or sun on your face. And you actually realize, oh, shit, I am on a beach in Hawaii. I thought I was in this conference room for the last who knows how long. What's happening, right? And like how kind of jarring that experience can be. And I think that, you know, one of the main reasons why we are so terrified of dementia and why we don't talk about it and why it's, you know, like Erin started out with, right? How stigmatized all this language is and talking about it is because at the end of the day, right, it's about disconnection. And that's what scares humans most is feeling disconnected. And we imagine that if we had dementia and we were in a different version of reality or our version of reality, that we would be disconnected from everything that we care about and love. And so that is why kind of on an existential level, reality orientation is like not the way to go because it's creating disconnection for nothing, right? We're being antagonistic and we're arguing with someone's experience just because we think our reality is right and their reality is wrong, right? And so I think that it can feel very scary as a care partner to acknowledge, you know, we're kind of jumping into the deep end of the existential pool here, but like, what is reality, right? When we're face to face with the truth that there is not just one, we can kind of, you know, oh no, if I, you know, if you grab onto me and we both acknowledge like what is reality, we're both going to drown in this deep end of the existential pool here. You know, and so we try to ground ourselves to our own truth of reality. And that's not what is called for. That's not what's needed when we're partnering with someone living with dementia or someone that's experiencing a different reality. We meet them there because that's what they need. They need connection. And that's what we're so afraid of that sometimes we're too scared to look at it, you know?
Well, and you hear a lot of people who are like, oh, but I don't want to lie to them, you know, and I don't want to be like deceiving of them. And I'm like, but like you want to, so you want to, you know, talk them out of their reality. To what end? Who does that serve?
Yeah.
Who does that serve?
Like ultimately, who does that serve? Does that sit better with you and your moral conscience because you don't like to be a person who lies, but you're going to send this person into a spiral of anxiety or fear or, oh my God, I can't believe I couldn't remember. Like or are you going to do them the kindness of, you know, people call it all sorts of things, right? Like therapeutic fabrication or validation therapy or anything like that. But like really have to kind of check our agenda at the door sometimes when people aren't willing to make those kind of shifts in the way they approach their care. Like, oh, I'm not going to lie to somebody. I was like, well, we're gonna have to do some work there. So,
yeah. And I would love to, JL, you were starting to touch on something that I think leads into one of the other things that we wanted to talk about today, which is legacy work. You know, you were talking about that existential human fear of being disconnected. And I think coupled with that is our fear of being forgotten. And how hugely validating and comforting it is for people who are losing pieces of their memory and therefore pieces of their identity and of their self to be able to be a vessel to hold that or to create a vessel to hold that, be it art or music, which is the tools that we are using most often. And I'll give an example of a resident who I was working with recently who passed away this year. And he was a member of the Seattle Men's Chorus for 35 years. So this was a piece of his life that was incredibly important to him. And when we first met, he had some aphasia, but he was able to express himself in a way that other people understood. And of course, as that progressed, that was more and more challenging for him. But early in our relationship, he talked to me about his experiences with the Seattle Men's Chorus and being accepted as a gay man and having community and family in that chorus. And just one example, one story he told me was they had an opportunity to perform at Carnegie Hall. And when they performed Somewhere Over the Rainbow together, it was a transcendent experience for him. It was an experience that encompassed a lot of what he finds meaningful in his life, his purpose, his community. And so that was just a very moving experience for him. And at end of life, when he was in hospice, unable to communicate at all, I sang him that song, and he was opening his eyes and making faces at me and looking at me. And I told him his story. I told him the story he told me about Somewhere Over the Rainbow, I got about Carnegie Hall, about Seattle Men's Chorus. And I told him, whenever I sing that song, whenever I hear that song, I think of you. I think of that story. I remember you. And of course, this is all nonverbal, but the look of relief, the look of peace that came over him was incredibly rewarding, and just existentially meaningful for somebody who's letting go, leaving this earth. He had no children, he had no spouse, right? He never married. That was his family. And just knowing my story is remembered, people will share my story, people will, I'm as a human vessel departing, but me as a memory, me as getting more existential, me as an idea, I can stay. I'll still be here. Something is going to hold my memory. And that is part of why legacy work is so important. And I would actually love to hear JL talk about this more, because honestly, like I did a little bit of legacy work before we started to partner, but her passion for legacy work really ignited a passion in me and changed the way that I do things. So JL, do
Oh,
you want to jump in there?
yeah, I would love to. That makes my heart feel really warm to hear that. Yeah, so I'm super connected to legacy work through the lens of storytelling. Um, I come from a long line of storytellers, and I think it's probably like the Jew in me.
Yes.
That's like kind of our vibe. Storytelling and sharing information through like oratory, right? But that is a part of many, many cultures, most cultures throughout the world. That's just my kind of particular lens of it, of how why stories are so important to me, that I know about my great grandparents' lives. I know about my grandparents, courtship and how they met, and that, the night they met at the drive-in theater in Los Angeles, my grandpa snuck in to the drive-through in the trunk of a car so they didn't have to pay for an extra head. Like those are that seems like such a silly little story, but it is so it brings me to this place of like, imagine 1950s Los Angeles drive-in, my like, skirting the law grandpa who then went on to become a lawyer. Like there's this beautiful sense memory I can have just because I've heard that story so many times. And I think that Kaylee really hit the nail on the head of knowing that your story has been heard, and not just heard, but internalized and becomes part of someone else's story that they can then perpetuate. That touches on the most deeply human parts of us. I mean, humans love to feel like we existed and we mattered. We just can't get enough of it. And that's why thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, early societies were drawn on cave walls. We were using coal and charcoal and pigments to, draw a little landscape of our hunt with the buffalo that year. We want people to know, ooh, this was a rough one. Those buffaloes were wilding out. It was hard to get one. We want people to be able to see like, oh yeah, I remember the summer of 5 when we were when we were chasing those buffaloes. That was a rough summer. And we connect, right? We have this through line. And that's why, you know, you go on a hike and you see people have carved their initials into a tree because, like, hey, we went on this hike with this person and we were so in love, and we were so in love that we need everyone to know in this moment, right? The poor trees, they just have to be these like these like pillars of people's, you know, summer romances. But you know, it's so deeply human to want to say or have an action that displays, you know, I was here, I existed, I was a person with a life, and I mattered. And when we get dementia, and or when one gets dementia and starts to lose their personal through line, their thread of how all of their moments of I was here, I mattered connect to one another, it can start to feel like a loss of identity, right? If someone were to ask you, hey, you know, Trisha, who are you? Tell me about you. What's, you know, tell me what your deal is. You would probably tell them your experiences, right? Where you came from, maybe where you went to school, or how you met this person that was important, or, you know, this time that you had an experience that changed your life, that brought you to music therapy, right? You tell who you are through your experience. And when someone says, who are you? And you can't go pick out this handful of experiences that make sense together, that equal you as a human being, one, it can be incredibly ungrounding of this moment of like, who am I don't know, right? But then also it starts to make other people feel like they can't connect to you. If they're afraid of that own thing happening within themselves, it can be very difficult to search for that through line and to lean in like Kaylee did, right? Of like why this song meant so much to this person in this moment, and you saw all the connections, and then you were able to like concretize that for them. That's kind of what legacy work is when you're doing it as a, you know, as a clinician or someone that's supporting, you know, another person in end of life. Doing legacy work is your job is to lean in and find the through lines. Your job is to listen and to gather data and then figure out how it fits together in a way that makes sense for who that person is, and to be a platform for them to tell their story. And sometimes people do legacy work, you know, if they get a cancer diagnosis and they want to first person tell their story, completely from their perspective. Other people engage in legacy work later, you know, along the course of a terminal illness, or, you know, at the end stages of dementia. And some of the legacy work I've done was with completely, you know, nonverbal people living with dementia who were, you know, on hospice, you know, a week or two away from dying. And the most they could do was to, you know, I'm an art therapist, and so I would give them a lot of times, especially if people are laying in bed or in a wheelchair, a tilt-in space wheelchair or something like that, I will kind of hold up in front of them at an angle a piece of paper and load up the paintbrush with colors, and they can just hold the paintbrush still, and I will move the paper around on the brush to help them create. And sometimes the most someone can do is like point to a color in the palette of watercolors. And I had a wonderful experience once where a gentleman just pointed to blue, and that was all he was able to show up and communicate. And I said, blue, amazing, let's do it. Loaded up that blue paintbrush and moved this, you know, watercolor paper around with him. And then another care partner walked through and said, hey, so you making a blue painting? Is that from your time in the Navy? And this gentleman just got the biggest smile on his face and nodded. And he was like, yeah, that's what I thought. And it was just this moment of this one piece that this other care partner knew that I didn't know, and that I got, you know, found the blue connection. And this person was like, hey, your time in the Navy. And that was part of this man's identity. And he was so proud of his time in the service and his time abroad. And that I was able to connect to that whole line of his life just from this color blue that he chose that day, and someone witnessing and knowing his story. And so that is, you know, that's kind of a great example of legacy work, and why I just love it. I love stories. I love hearing who people are and helping people communicate, you know, what their soul wants to say and what they want to be known for.
How awesome that that other person was able to come in at that moment and make that connection for all three of you. That's
Yes.
awesome. And a great example of why it's important for everyone to kind of be on the same page about the importance of this. And also why co-treatment is so
Yes.
such a big, yeah, plays such a big part in correct me if I'm wrong, so we're not treating dementia, but co-treatment, right? That's the right word. Co-treatment is important because it allows us to do expand on things in that way and to get deeper into all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. And that's one of the things I love about this partnership between JL, Aaron, and I is um, inevitably just being different humans who are caring for the same individual or the same group of individuals. We're going to come with a different perspective. But then you add the layer of our different modalities, and they're really complementary. They're all very person centered. They're all very validation centered. They're all very expressive, which is very fun. And I find a lot of that Venn diagram has a very healthy overlap there. And I also love it because, like, let's say we're working with somebody. I'll actually just give you a real life example. We are going to be starting work with a client who loves to sing and did like weekly jams with her community and
Love
has
that.
this awesome songbook that is my favorite resource and gold mine as a music therapist.
Perfect.
Like, I'm sorry, you have an exact songbook of all the songs you love in the keys
Hi.
that you sing them in?
On a
Thank
silver
you.
platter. Yes. Like, hi, perfect client. Like, what?
Amazing.
Does not always happen.
They're also a dancer and a gardener. They were a professional dancer for years. Both of those things are things that Aaron is.
I have a total dance background and I work in horticultural therapy and memory care. So it's like ding, ding, ding. Hi. Yeah. Anyway.
And then also she's an artist. She's a visual artist and she loves painting. And we're like, hello, perfect client for exactly who we are and the skills that we have. So that's really cool is, if it was just me working with this individual, I would lean hard into that jam. I'd lean hard into that songbook. We'd do a little bit of dancing. I'm not a dancer, but I know how to move my body to music, right? But I wouldn't be able to speak to the parts of her identity that are really central for her, like gardening and art, in the way that Aaron and JL are able to do. So us coming together, we're able to treat her as a fuller, more complex person and meet her in all of those areas that really spark her joy and her passion and give us all these different options and all these myriad ways to communicate with her and to connect with her.
Yeah.
Yes to everything that you just said. And the other piece that makes them, I will say them, an ideal client but community to work with is that the person who came to us is her spouse, and reaching out from a place of like, I need help, I need support, I want to support not only my wife who I love but also myself. And I want to get my family and my community on board. And we're like, oh my gosh, first of all, like, let's just start by acknowledging the pee out of you, because that is so amazing that you're starting from there, right? And I think that's the other piece that, we bring to the table with our approach, is that it's not just about, working with the person themselves who's living with dementia, but it's very much working with their families, their communities, getting that support system in place, getting people on the same page, having it be, a collective journey, having there be lots of self-care structures in place to be able to collectively grieve along the course of this journey. I'll probably let JL speak more to that, but I think that was another really important marker that really drew us to this particular client and makes us really, really excited to work with them. So
Thank you for yes-anding me just now.
Hey,
The improv in me is very happy.
hey.
Yeah.
Some
If
might
you are-
argue that that's a skill in a memory care setting. They're
Yes,
like
and?
Absolutely.
the
Oh,
yes
yeah.
and memory, the improv yes and.
Yes, it's the 1950s, and your favorite song is, to go back to what you said before.
Exactly.
Go ahead, JL.
Honestly, if you have an improv background or you're interested at all in, improv comedy, dementia care is the place for you.
Word.
There have been times where, and this is right, like the pushing back against reality orientation and meeting someone in their own reality, right? There have been times where I was in the hallway, of the community where I was working, and someone was crouching behind a table because the enemy was advancing and they were, on the front line and they were in the trenches. And instead of being like, you're not, let's go eat some snacks. Like, like how disturbing and distressing would it be to imagine you're in a trench and someone's like, let's go have snacks. And so like, yes. And I crouched down. I was on my walkie talkie getting, orders from the captain, and we were, told to stand down and that we could go on leave, and then we both went on leave and we did have a snack. But it is this ability to like, you show up and you act and you meet them where they are and you yes and your way through dementia sometimes. But yeah.
What a
Yeah,
great example of de-escalation. Sorry, keep going.
Uh-huh.
But I was like, where's this going to go? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. One thing I was going to say, Erin, when you were talking is, you were mentioning about people reaching out and asking for help, right? And I think that's a part of our work that you do so well and that you offer so much support to, is this myth with being a care partner that if I love someone enough, I can do it all. Right. If I love my person so much that I'm willing to give up anything to care for them, or I'm willing to put in all the effort and just do the most. Right. And that's a false equivalency. How much you love someone has no connection to how much labor you can do on their behalf or for them or with them. And it is truly a communal effort to care for someone, right? And I think that is especially in our culture of like hyper individualism and perfectionism and productivity
And privacy.
Yes. Oh, especially, yeah, you have to be vulnerable to be like, one, I'm living with a person or I'm caring for a person who has a disability, right? You have to say the disability word, woof. Most people don't want to do that. And then on top of it, you have to say, I'm a vulnerable human and I need help and I can't do it all myself. Double woof. Like people are so resistant to that. And that's what we try to do. And I think, part of Erin's, dementia education that we offer is restructuring that narrative for people. And you can love someone to the moon and back and still rely on your support system and still take care of yourself and still reach out for help and still be able to say, oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed. I just can't today. And that doesn't make you any less of a care partner.
Yeah. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. In a way, these episodes feel a little bit out of order because the next part 2, is when we're going to define what the Creative Dementia Collective is, but we just dove into this conversation and it was so fluid. This is obviously where I split it. Sorry to leave you on this cliffhanger, but next week we're going to define more of what the Creative Dementia Collective is, as well as some topics and session content that these ladies are really passionate about that may surprise you. So we're going to be talking a little bit more about censorship and sex within the dementia community and how we can support those parts of the people in our lives with dementia. So stay tuned for that. It's definitely a good conversation, so holistic, and I appreciate that so much. Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. Again, please follow us online and on social media at Music Therapy Chronicles. Consider becoming a patron over on patreon.com. Patrons have the exclusive opportunity to ask guest questions. And if you or someone you know is interested in being on the show, please let me know by sending an email to hello@musictherapychronicles.com. Our quote this week comes from Freud. Unexpressed emotions will never die. They are buried alive and will come forth later in uglier ways.